Hello. Today I'll be reviewing the blue cards for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. For information about the rating scale, you can take a look at the white card review. Acquisition Octopus, 2 and a blue for an artifact creature, equipment Octopus. Whenever Acquisition Octopus or equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Reconfigure 2. This is the Scroll Thief variant in the set, and these are always fairly solid. This one has the additional option to be attached to a flyer or otherwise evasive creature, giving it quite a bit of a boost. This is a solid B-. Anchor to Reality, 2 blue. As an initial cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Search your library for an equipment or vehicle card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. If it had mana value less than the sacrificed permanent's mana value, scry 2. In Limited, this is going to be a 2-for-1 for yourself, unless you're sacrificing a token, and there's not too many ways to make that. There's also not too many powerful equipment or vehicle cards, at least not high mana cost, making this just a bit of a stinker. The scry 2 as well means that you're sacrificing a high mana value to find something lesser, which just doesn't work out. This is an F. Armguard Familiar, 1 and a blue for an artifact creature, equipment beast. 2/1 with ward 2, an equipped creature gets +2/+1 and has ward 2, with reconfigure for 4. Most of the time this is a hard to deal with piker, but later in the game you can equip it to your creatures to give them a significant boost. This is a very solid common and a good C+. Awakened Awareness, X blue. Enchantment Aura, enchant artifact or creature. When Awakened Awareness enters the battlefield, put X/1/1 counters on enchanted permanent. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it has base power and toughness 1/1. This is an interesting modal spell. For blue, you can turn a creature to have a base power 1/1. That's not that strong. We've seen turn to frog effects before and they remove abilities, but it's not too bad. The ability to pump up your own creature, however, late in the game, is fairly significant. While the modality of the card is strong, it's not the best at either one of its abilities, so this is definitely a C. Behold the Unspeakable, 3 blue for a saga. The first chapter, creatures you don't control get -2/-0 until your next turn. The second, if you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, draw 4 cards. Otherwise, scry 2, then draw 2 cards. And then it flips into the Vision of the Unspeakable, a flying trampler that gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand. This is a late game control card, and as such it's hard to tell exactly how good it will be. If the format's fast, this gets much weaker, but if the format's a bit slower, this can be an in-game threat for a control deck, as well as decent card advantage. Though it's hard to evaluate, I think this is about a B-. It's worth picking up, and can be one of the stronger cards if you base your deck around it. Covert Technician, 2 blue for an artifact creature, human ninja. It's a 2/4 with ninjutsu for 1 and a blue. Whenever Covert Technician deals combat damage to a player, you may put an artifact card with mana value less than or equal to the damage from your hand onto the battlefield. This allows you to cheat very low value artifacts into play, so that's more of trinket decks than anything else. So if you just look at it as a 2/4 ninjutsu for 2, it's fine. It's the kind of card that you're not happy to pick, but it has some other artifact synergies, and maybe it's a C, or a C-. Discover the Impossible, 2 and a blue for an instant. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Exile 1 of them face down and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may cast the exile card without paying its mana cost, if it's an instant spell with mana value 2 or less. If you don't, put that card into your hand. In Limited, most of the time you're not going to find a 2 mana instant. There's just not that many in the set, and not that many that you want to play. So this is going to be 3 mana, look at the top 5, put it in your hand. Impulse is typically 2 mana, and paying an additional mana for the slight chance to do something is just not worth it. There's also no spells matters in this set, making this even worse than it would be usually. This is a D. Disruption Protocol, blue for an instant. As an initial cost to cast a spell, tap an untapped artifact you control or pay 1. Counter target spell. So this is the cancel variant that has a sort of weird cost reduction. There's a lot of artifacts in play, so there's a non-negative chance this can be a blue just straight up counter spell. That's pretty solid at X looking for it, and this is a solid C-. Essence Capture, blue. Counter target creature spell. Put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. This is a reprint from War of the Spark, and it's fine. Just like in that set though, this is several key permanent types, notably vehicles, as well as enchantments and such. The fact that you get the benefit if you have a creature as well is fine, but it means that you don't want to play this early game when you want to be countering creatures. Overall, this is a sort of lackluster counterspell, and is a C-. Futurist Operative, 3 and a blue for a creature human ninja. As long as Futurist Operative is tapped, it's a human citizen with base power and toughness 1/1 and can't be blocked. And then for 2 and a blue you can untap Futurist Operative. So effectively what that means is this is a ninjutsu enabler. It's 4 mana, attacks, and can't be blocked, and can untap to either do 3 damage or be swapped out for whatever ninja you have. Paying 4 mana up front though is definitely a significant cost, and most of the ninjutsu stuff you want to happen is 2 or 3 mana. As such, this is not going to quite get it done, and I think this is a C-. Futurist Sentinel, 3 and a blue for a 6/6 with crew 3. It's an artifact vehicle. Turning 3 power into 6 power is fine, paying 4 mana for it, not so fine. This is another one that just doesn't quite get there. I don't think you'd want to play this unless you have a lot of vehicle synergies. This is a D. Ghost Shintai of Lost Wisdom, 1 and a blue for flying 0/4. Legendary enchantment creature Shrine. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1. When you do, target player mills X cards, where X is the number of shrines you control. There's not very much mill in this set, and it's definitely an archetype that needs a lot of support to actually work. With that said, this is a 0/4 blocker for 2. In defensive decks, that's not bad, and especially at having flying, means it's a pretty decent rate. If that's something you're interested in, this is a solid card, but it's best to just ignore that second text. This is a C-, D+. Guardians of Oboro, 2 and a blue for creature Moonfolk Samurai. Defender, 3/4. Modified creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have Defender. There's very few Defenders in this set, so generally speaking, this is a 3/4 that can attack with some work. That's fine, it's a defensive card, and does block most of the creatures in this set. As such, it's a C. Inventive Iteration, 3 and a blue for a Saga. First chapter, return up to 1 target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. The second, return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. If you can't, draw a card. Then it flips into a flying 3/3, and whenever you cast a spell, your opponents can't cast spells with the same mana value as that spell until your next turn. It's easy to evaluate the first 2 chapters here. Bouncing thing for 4 mana is not great. Returning an artifact card or drawing a card at worst is fine. So it's sort of a 1.5 for 1. And then you get a flying 3/3. But remember, because of the delay, this is going to be on turn 6 or so, which is just not amazing. The effect is strange. It's hard to know how it's going to line up. Both players are playing on curve. It could just completely stop your opponent, but most of the time I don't think it's going to have an effect. This is one of the more disappointing rares, and is maybe a C. Invoke the Winds, 1 blue 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 blue, sorcery. Gain control of target artifact or creature, untap it. So for 5 mana you get a mind control. In addition, the untap's quite relevant. Most of the time if you're mind controlling their best creature, it's already going to have attacked you. This helps circumvent that, and lets it block as well. The mana cost is steep, but if you manage to cast it, you'll be extremely happy. Just because of that mana cost, this does get a downside, so it's an A-/B+. Jin Gitaxis, Progress Tyrant, 5 blue blue. Legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor. Whenever you cast an instant, artifact, or sorcery spell, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This ability triggers only once per turn. Whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, counter that spell. This ability triggers only once each turn. And he's a 5/5. If you get this down, you win the game. Your opponent needs 2 instants or sorceries to take this down, and if you untap, then you get a copy your first spell. This is completely busted, but it's also 7 mana. That's fairly expensive, but as soon as you resolve it, you win the game. This is a solid A. Kairi, the Swirling Sky, 4 blue blue for a legendary creature, Dragon Spirit. A 6/6 with flying and ward 3. And when it dies, choose 1. Return any number of target non-land permanents with totem mana value 6 or less to their owner's hand. Or, mill 6 cards, then return up to 2 instant or sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand. The blue cycle of the dragons, and it's very strong. The ward 3 helps keep it alive, so that you can keep beating in the air, and then the dice trigger can either give you back a huge amount of value, or help stabilize the board. This is great basically no matter what the situation is, so this is a solid A+. March of the Swirling Mist, X and a blue, instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may exile any number of blue cards from your hand. This costs 2 less for each card exiled this way. up to X target creatures phase out. This is the blue member of this cycle, and it's one of the more interesting ones. For about 3 or 4 mana, it can just act as a fog. It can also help save things from a board wipe, or just save one thing from removal for 2 mana. There's a fair amount of options. None of them are game-breaking, but they're pretty solid. The phasing out can also get through blockers, giving it additional utility. This is a solid rare that has a lot of uses, and even when it's not the best, it's still going to be getting 1 for 1. This is a solid A. Mindlink Mech. 2 and a blue for an artifact vehicle, 4/3 with flying. When it becomes crewed for the first time each turn, it becomes a copy of target non-legendary creature that crewed it this turn, except it's 4/3, is a vehicle artifact in addition to its other types and has flying, with crew 1. So mainly, this picks up the keywords or damage triggers from ninjutsu type things. It grabs a few miscellaneous things from whatever crewed it, and then is also a 4/3 for 3 with flying. Those are all pretty solid rates, and there's really nothing to be against here. This is an A-. Mirror Shell Crab. 5 blue for an artifact creature crab, a 5/7 with ward 3, but it also has Channel, where you can pay 3 mana, discard it to counter target spell or ability unless its controller pays 3. This is either a late game threat that's hard to deal with, or it's an early game mana leak, but for 3 mana. Both sides are fine, especially in a control deck, and having the availability of both means this is one of the better commons in the set. This is a solid B-. Mnemonic Sphere. 1 and a blue for an artifact. 1 in blue, sacrifice Mnemonic Sphere, draw 2 cards. Or Channel, 1, discard it, draw a card. So this is cycling for 1, but you can also pay 4 mana in installments to draw 2 cards. That's pretty solid, especially with all the artifact synergies in the set, and with the artifact returning synergies. This is going to be one of the better card advantage engines in any sort of grindy deck, and is a really good pickup in those. This is a C+, B-. Mobilizer Mech. 1 in a blue for an artifact vehicle, 3/4 with flying. When it becomes crewed, up to one other vehicle you control becomes crewed as well. Crew 3. So this is basically a 2-for-1 special. You crew a thing, you get another crew. In the vehicle decks, this is going to be fairly strong, allowing one pilot to go much further. And notably, the pilot tokens that crew for 3 can crew this with just a single one. Even without the vehicle decks, it's fine. It can get you in some flying damage and is fairly difficult to block. So this is going to be a C+. The Modern Age, 1 in a blue. The first 2 stages are draw a card, then discard a card. Then it flips into a flying 2/3. This is not exciting. The 2/3 again is delayed, so it's around turn 4 at the earliest. And the looting is, the looting's not inherently card advantage, but there are ways to make it that way. This is a very solid common, and is a C+. Moon Circuit Hacker, 1 in a blue for an enchantment creature human ninja, a 2/1, with ninjutsu for 1 blue. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card, unless Moon Circuit Hacker entered the battlefield this turn. So basically, the first ninjutsu is card advantage. Everyone after that is just looting. The fact that you only have to pay 1 for this allows you to double spell, or play back the creature that you bounced. That gives us quite a bit of advantage, especially with all the little flyers in the set. I'm always happy to play cantrip creatures, and most of the time this is what this will function as long as you have sufficient evasive threats. As such, this is a B-. Moonfolk Puzzlemaker, 2 in a blue for an artifact creature, Moonfolk Wizard, flying 1/4. When it becomes tapped, scry 1. This is another one of those ninjutsu enablers, but at 3 mana, it's a little bit awkward. It can also just serve, the stats are not very good for attacking, but the become tapped encourages that. Tap can also mean crewing, but again, this only has 1 power. The numbers just don't quite add up on this one, and it's a C-. Moonsnare Prototype, 1 in a blue for an artifact. Tap an untapped artifact or creature you control, add 1 colorless. Or Channel, 4 in a blue, discard it. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it on the top or bottom of their library. Now remember, they get to choose whether it's on top or bottom, not you. Still, this is a mana ramp artifact that can also be a totally lost at some point in the game. It's a little bit clunky for a mana ramp, but considering how many artifacts are running around, this is pretty solid. It's definitely a C+. Moonsnare Specialist, 3 in a blue for a creature human ninja, a 2/2 with ninjutsu for 3, 2 in a blue. When it enters the battlefield, return up to one target creature to its owner's hand. Mana War is one of the best limited creatures, and this is a variant of that. Of course, all of these depend on how easy ninjutsu is to get, but even at 4 mana bounce a thing, that's been a very playable card in the past. This is a C+, B-. Network Disruptor. 1 and a blue for an artifact creature, Moonfolk Rogue. It's a 1/1 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, tap target permanent. This is one of the best ninjutsu enablers. Tapping down a permanent on ETB can help get in ninjutsu threats later, and just the 1/1 flying for 1 is really good stat line, in addition to being an artifact. There's a lot of little synergies that add up with this card, making it just really solid. This is a B. Planar Incision. 1 and a blue, instant. Exile target artifact or creature, and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a 1/1 counter. Blink effects are fine, and this is again fine. The 1/1 counter is nice, but the fact that this is only a single use, whereas many of them have some ability to do it twice, makes this a little bit lackluster. It's a C. Prosperous Thief. 2 and a blue for a creature human ninja, a 3/2 with ninjutsu for 1 and a blue. Whenever 1 or more ninja or rogue creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. This is one of those cards that can blow up in the game quite quickly if it comes out on turn 2. Coming out later, its influence definitely dips down, but the high rolls are quite high. And even after that, it's still a 3/2, which is a fine attacker that'll often trade for a card. This is a B-. The Reality Chip. 1 and a blue for a legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish. It's a 0/4, and you may look at the top card of your library anytime. As long as the Reality Chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library, with Reconfigure for 3, 2 and a blue. This is a Future Sight type effect, where you stick it on a creature and then gain value. That's always very powerful, and the fact that you pay the 5 mana in 2 installments makes it much better. It is more vulnerable to removal than that type of effect, but just the ability to play it as blocker early on and then get that advantage is huge. This is an A. Reality Heist. 5 blue, instant. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 artifact cards from among them and put them in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's fairly easy in the set to get 2 or 3 artifacts, and if you're really trying, 4 or 5 is reasonable. With that said, if you have 2, this becomes 5 mana to potentially get 2 artifacts. We've seen similar cards be fine. The fact that this is instant speed adds quite a bit, and this is one of those sets where there are enough artifacts running around to justify it. This is a solid B. Replication Specialist. 4 and a blue for creature Moonfolk Artificer. Flying 3/4. Whenever a non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 and a blue. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that artifact. A 3/4 flyer for 5 is a fine rate, and then if you untap and get a duplication, you feel really good. The fact that this can do that multiple times a turn, or over a period of time, means that not only is this a good body, it's a must-kill threat from your opponent in an artifact-focused deck. Because of the synergies and the deck that wants this is going to be an A- or a B+. Cyber Trespassers. 4 and a blue for an artifact creature, Moonfolk Rogue. It's a 3/5. It also has Channel. 3 and a blue, discard it. Tap up to 2 creatures you don't control. Those creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap step. So you have this Moto spell. You can get a vanilla 3/5 for 5. Not what you want, but it can help save the ground game. Or you can Frost Breath for 4 mana. Both sides are mana more than you really want to pay for that effect, but having the flexibility again is good. Still, that cost adds up, so this is going to be a C-. Short Circuit. 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura. Flash. Enchant artifact or creature. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets -3/-0 and loses flying. This is the blue shut down a creature's power. Flash is always good to have on these, and enchantment synergies make this better than in other sets. -3/-0 also shuts down most of the creatures in the set, or at least makes them 1 or so power. Just be careful with how you play this because of ninjutsu. Don't ever play this on an unblocked attacker into mana. This is a B-. Sky Swimmer Koi. 3 and a blue for a creature fish, 3/3 with flying. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. This effect has been seen before on a 2-mana 2/1 in Modern Horizons 2, and that's solid. There were artifact lands in that set that made this better, but even on its own, this one has a much better body. A 3/3 with flying for 4 is a pretty good aggressive threat that can get the game over with, and the looting is a great additional effect. This is a solid C+. Spell Pierce, blue, instant. Counter target non-creature spell unless it's controller based too. You never want to main deck Spell Pierce, even though the set does have a lot of non-creatures, but in the sideboard, it's a really solid option against sagas and similar. As such, I'd give this a D. Suit Up, 2 and a blue, instant. Until end of turn, target creature or vehicle becomes an artifact creature with base tower and toughness 4/5. Draw a card. Every set, they keep pumping up these numbers of blue combat checks that transform things. It's hard to say whether these numbers are good enough yet. It doesn't look like it, but they're really creeping up. As such, this is a D+. Tameshi, Reality Architect, 2 and a blue for a legendary creature, Moonfolk Wizard, a 2/3. Whenever one or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. X and a white. Return a land you control to its owner's hand. Return target artifact or enchantment with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So this is definitely a commander card. That's everything about it. It's also a multicolor card, as without the white cost, this is going to be a 3-mana 2/3, which is not unplayable, but is pretty lackluster. If you can pay the white cost, however, drawing cards, even returning lands, this will take over the game unless you die to aggressive creatures early on. As such, this is a B+/A-. Tamio's Completion, 3 and a blue, enchantment aura, flash, enchant artifact creature or planeswalker. When Tamio's Completion enters the battlefield, tap enchanted permanent. If it's an equipment, unattach it. Enchanted permanent loses all abilities and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So this is the blue creature removal. At 4 mana, it's a steep price to pay, but flash is very helpful. The fact that it can also hit equipments and take them off the creature, especially relevant in this set, means the added flexibility is probably worth the additional mana. As such, this is a B. Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh, 2 blue for a legendary planeswalker, Tezzeret. Starts with 4 loyalty, and then has a passive. The first activated ability of an artifact you activate each turn costs 2 less to activate. +1 is draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact card. The -2 is target artifact becomes an artifact creature. If it isn't a vehicle, it is base power and toughness 4/4. And then the -6 is, whenever an artifact you control becomes tapped, draw a card. This is one of those planeswalkers that doesn't offer removal or strict card advantage unless you work around him. As such, it's a bit worse than some of the others in the set. But the passive reducing reconfigure costs is very significant, and there are a lot of the artifacts in the set, meaning that making a 4/4 or drawing a card is not hard to do. You'll only want to play this in an artifact-based deck, but in that it will be one of the best cards. As such, this is an A. Thirst for Knowledge, 2 and a blue, instant. Draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact card. As stated before, artifacts. Blue loves them. There's lots of them. This is going to be a good card. This is a B. Thousand Face Shadow, 1 and a blue for a creature human ninja. It's a 1/1 with ninjutsu for 2 blue. It also is flying. When it enters the battlefield from your hand, if it's attacking, create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature. That token enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. There's some awkwardness to this, but you need the mana for the ninjutsu trigger, be attacking with 2 creatures, have one of them be unblocked, and the other one something you want to create a copy of. But, assuming all that goes ahead, you do get a token copy of a creature. So this is sort of a clone effect. The copy also stays around, unlike a lot of other of these type of effects. It's only a one-shot, unless you bounce this back with ninjutsu, however. But you can also just ignore that text. Have it being flying 1/1, then ninjutsu it for another creature, have that attack, get its effect, then later ninjutsu this. And that's a pretty good play pattern, and not one that's unreasonable. As such, this is pretty good in the ninjutsu deck, and if you manage to get 1 token from this, then you'll be pretty happy. As such, this is a A-. And that's all the blue cards. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and have a good day. Please like, subscribe, comment, and take a look at my Patreon.